Snipers, you have to see what's happening to the Bitcoin price this Friday. As I decided to do a second video update as we've lost the 50-day moving average. Currently, Bitcoin's low is right around the $38,500 level as I record this video. But I wanted to talk about the risks that we're taking coming into the weekend because a lot happened today. The DXY pushed to the upside against a major resistance level. We saw gold move to the upside to end the week, which means that institutions are in fear coming into the weekend. Of course, we also talked about the traditional markets earlier with Japan forming new yearly lows. Chinese traditional markets also forming new yearly lows. The Euro 100 forming new yearly lows. The S&P 500 is the only market that has yet to form new yearly lows. But with all the international markets dropping, does that give us a little bit of a hint of what's to come next week for the S&P 500? Will Bitcoin potentially even be a leading indicator for the S&P 500? Will Bitcoin even see a capitulation to this weekend? I'm not going to put that on the table just yet, but what I will say is, as we've predicted here on the Snipers channel, as 41,950 broke, it opened up the door to 38,000, and now we're seeing that play part with the current candle low right around 38,500. We've yet to really see strong volume buy the dip, and so heading into the weekend, we talked about on-chain exchange flow earlier, over $200 million of Bitcoin coming onto exchanges, a lot of USDT leaving exchanges. What I want to realize first and foremost is with the Bitcoin price action that we're seeing right now, we are now forming this daily candle with a bearish continuation close here. And you can see in less than 5 minutes, we're gonna see this daily candle close, which is why I had to get this video update out to you guys. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm if you support the urgent content. But right now we're coming to face this very, very big support where we have the weekly open, the previous weekly open, and the volume support at 38,000. So the question is, if we open this door at 38,000, what's going to happen? Is Bitcoin going to come to form a higher low, possibly see a bounce at 35,000? Or are we going to see an all-out capitulation below this major macro structural support to potentially bring Bitcoin into a new range with a resistance of 34,788 and a support of 25,880? Well, let's talk about that right now, because I think that this is something that we have to keep in mind coming into the weekend as a potential scenario on the table, because we cannot control what's happening right now with traditional markets, of course, and we also can't control what's happening to the strength of the US dollar. As the DXY pushes up, as the dollar strengthens, it will affect asset prices. And so understand this right now. We have known that the cryptocurrency market has been fearful just based on looking at some of these altcoins against Bitcoin, because this is a very good leading indicator and a market sentiment indicator. And the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart specifically, you can see right now, is coming to test this extremely important support level after failing to break out of this structural pattern, this symmetrical triangle. Coming down to this support level right now is a pretty big deal, because this is showing that altcoins are moving into Bitcoin right now in fear of something. And that something could, number one, be potentially some downside in the market, with Bitcoin potentially seeing less downside. We see altcoins move into Bitcoin, or we could just be seeing altcoins move into Bitcoin because there's just a sentiment that we may not see as much strength with altcoins, and that people would rather hold their assets into Bitcoin, a larger asset with market cap, a safer asset to say the least. And of course, the digital version of gold, with gold moving up to the upside, is an exact example of what happens when there's fear in the markets. We see commodities move to the upside. We see strength in gold as a hedge. And so the same thing with the cryptocurrency market. Bitcoin dominance will start to rise up when there's fear, because people are moving into Bitcoin as a hedge since it's the digital version of gold. So with that being said, this all not a surprise for those that have been tuned in here on the Snipers channel, the #1 cryptocurrency channel on the internet. And we know that when Bitcoin dominance is moving up, we have to be careful when there's downside moves, because altcoins do have the tendency to bleed out during those downside moves. And so into this weekend, I think that the main thing we have to realize is that Bitcoin has lost the 50-day moving average so far, but it's still glued inside of the area where the 50-day is sitting, right around that 40,000, let's say $400 level. And so we haven't completely free-falled away from the 50-day. If we see a free fall from the 50-day, then that would certainly be a concerning scenario where we potentially have to look at that $25,880 level as a potential bottom. But for now, what we can keep in mind is that because the S&P 500 didn't form new lows to close the week, unlike a lot of the international markets, that there's a potential, at least through this weekend, Bitcoin holds 35,000. It doesn't form a further low. And I say that because Bitcoin has been the stronger asset against the S&P 500 since we've started to see the tables turn in the news with all of the Ukraine tension, inflation. And so I think that the most important thing to realize right now is we know the weekends are the most manipulated in the cryptocurrency market. We are potentially going to see a test of 38,000, which we know is a major support. And we are still at and around this 50-day moving average at 40,400. So if we want to assume any strength during the weekend and to avoid an all-out capitulation, what we need to see is some sort of buyers come in to bring Bitcoin back above 40,000 US dollars. That to me is going to be the early signs that maybe we're not going to be seeing any crazy price action into this weekend, that we could just move sideways inside of the range of 38,000 and 41,950. But if we start to come and test 38,000 and we do not see buyers come in, at that point, patience is the name of the game. You never want to catch a falling knife. And as I talked about earlier in our video, as we've lost this extremely important area around 40,400 where the 50-day is sitting, and everyone knowing that 38,000 is the next major support, the likelihood that we come lower than that, if we come towards 38,000, is potentially on the table. It's pretty high in my opinion. And so we have to monitor, once again, this $35,000 level as our weekend downside target for max amount of fear into the weekend. But because the S&P 500 did not form further lows, I think that a least likely scenario right now is that Bitcoin will breach below 35,000 during the weekend and see its price action move into a new range down below 30,000. I don't think that that right now is on the table. I think that we at least have enough puzzle pieces to confirm that at least during this weekend, we can stay within this consolidation range that we've been in over the last few weeks, and that we're not going to be seeing that all-out capitulation. But just keep in mind that I had to talk about this scenario because, of course, we addressed the bulls and the bears on this channel. And if we start to see weakness around that $38,000 level, that's when we have to prepare for something a little bit more significant. I just don't see that on the table just yet based on the revolving parts. But Bitcoin in the past has done things before the S&P 500. It's been a leading indicator sometimes to the S&P 500. And so it's always going to be there on the table. And with that being said, the last thing I want to talk about, snipers, is the fact that we know commodities are strong right now, especially gold moving up. Not a surprise, we've been monitoring gold, about to head towards the $2,000 big even, potentially to even form new all-time highs into next week. So this tells us that now we're seeing real fear come into the markets, and that probably has to do a lot with what's happening in the news. Of course, they're always going to be attaching narratives to what's happening to price action, but gold has been stable for a very long time. We've seen the effects of inflation on the market, and it certainly is time for gold to move to the upside. Bitcoin, just even, let's say, from the lows of March of 2020, around the $3,000 to $4,000 level, is still a very strong asset at 30,000, at 35,000, at even 25,000, because that's higher than the 2017, 2018 bull market all-time highs. And so does it have more room to come to the downside during times like this where there's fear? Well, here's another thing that we know here on the Cypress channel. The 200-week moving average has finally come above 20,000. And so the 200-week moving average, I like to call it the max amount of downside that an asset could realistically see before seeing a push back to the upside. Maybe you see 1 or 2 weeks where an asset, especially a bullish asset, will be around that 200-week moving average. But at that point, at some point or another, that 200-week moving average is always going to be a place where we'll see very strong accumulation occur by institutions and retail. And so I think that it's a very sensitive and a very, very interesting situation coming into the weekend. We're really going to be monitoring the price action. Once again, with altcoins seeing a lot of the downside right now prior to Bitcoin, and that's clearly shown with the altcoin charts that factor in the coins outside of Ethereum, I think that we're going to be seeing opportunities arise more than anything We know that altcoins outside of Ethereum already breached its major support level, but what we also know is that Bitcoin dominance is facing a pretty strong resistance at 44% dominance. And you can see we're actually seeing that reaction right now, and we have the monthly open now right around that 44% level. So I think one thing we also want to monitor coming into the weekend is Bitcoin going to fulfill some downside in the dominance? If that happens, if this scenario occurs where we reject 44%, that could garner some great opportunities for altcoins to move to the upside. Of course, those fundamentally sound coins are the ones we're talking about. And so, very interesting time. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. I think that more than anything, during a time like this, it's good to get more than one opinion. And so I'm gonna be reading the comments, responding to all the comments as I'm here having a little bit of a walk, about to have a cupcake at Disney. And with that being said, thank you all for tuning into the Snipers channel this Friday for the second video update. I appreciate each and every one of you snipers tuning into the channel. Based on Social Blade metrics, which analyzes YouTube accounts, we will hit 100,000 snipers on this channel within the next year. I think we'll do it in the next 60 to 90 days. And so I cannot wait to have a very strong community. We already have such a strong community with over 54,000 snipers here at youtube.com/snipers. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm once again for these urgent updates. And if something happens now, I will certainly get another video out. And so just to keep everything into a little bit of a nice consolidated package, the range that we're in right now has a support of 38,000, a resistance of 41,950. And the S&P 500 did not breach new lows for this recent close that we saw for this week's session, therefore indicating to me as a four-dimensional revolving part that Bitcoin is least likely to see a all-out capitulation below 35,000. But if we come to test 38,000, I think that there is a likelihood we could see maybe a wick into 35,000 just to form that higher low. And I think that the most important thing to realize is if we breach that recent low right around 34,788, that's going to be the sign that we're going to be moving into a new phase where Bitcoin can potentially even come to 26,000. I just don't see that as a likely scenario right now. And of course, getting above 41,950 right now is really what we need for Bitcoin to come back and test the macro structural resistance from that head and shoulder. We've been wanting to break that $44,800 level where it's sitting because that would invalidate this head and shoulder pattern. We've yet to see that. Now we're seeing a low volume rejection. I wouldn't even say it's an institutional rejection yet. We haven't seen 6-hour volume there. And so the early signs that Bitcoin is at least going to stay inside of the range of 38,000 to 41,950 is at least seeing some price action back to 40,000 here sometime soon, in the next 24 to 48 hours preferably. And so with that being said, thank you all for tuning to the Snipers channel. I'm going to eat this cupcake, and I'll see you guys next time. Snipers.